you're working and listening in the background, so I get it. It's a Wednesday morning. If at all possible, if you want to put on your video, it's always nice to see faces, but um, we get it if you can't. Um, so welcome to our first little webinar, bringing together the mind-body connection. And I just wanted to take a few minutes and explain like where this is coming from and why I have this lovely special being here with me today. Um, we Bekah is, if you, I think you read from my email. So Bekah is somebody that I work with. She's become not only a spiritual guide, but a friend, a coworker, a mother figure, I don't know, my right arm at times.
I can tell the mother figure, right?
Yeah, my heart. Um, so much in my world to meet, and so much that I've learned from her and I take into practice with a lot of my clients. It is just a thread that goes through both of our works. Well, surely her work, but more and more through the work that I do with clients. So a lot of times when Bekah and I are talking, we get going on a topic or a point of suffering for, potentially a client or for ourselves in our lives, and we have this vibrant conversation and we hang up and we're like, gosh, we really wish like our clients could hear this, or at the retreat we wish like a lot of people at the retreat could hear this conversation because they would get so much from it. So we thought, you know what, we're going to try. We're going to try to bring some of these conversations to both our communities and see where they lead. But before we could do that, I felt it was really important to just have this introduction to spirituality because I think there's a lot of, preconceptions about what it could be or what it is or what it isn't. And I thought that if we just kind of had this introduction to it, that may open up the conversation, and then it can lead to more intricate conversations about real life situations and how to apply this work to those real life situations. So that's where today stemmed from. And in the spirit of how when you put something out into the world, then the right thing appears at the right time. I happened to pick up the other day a book that I've had and read, and if you haven't read it, you should. It's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And in the beginning of it, it has this two-paragraph little blurb about spirituality that I thought would be a good sort of summary and explanation of where we're headed today. So I'm just going to read from it instead of try to put it into my own words, because that's what authors do. They put it into the words that are best. So I'm going to stick with that. But the word spirituality may not speak to those who dwell chiefly in the intellect or who equate the word with organized religion. If you prefer to think of spirituality as simply believing in connection, that's fine. If you choose to think of believing in magic, that's fine too. The things we believe carry charge, regardless of whether they can be proven or not. The practice of spirituality is a way of looking at a world where you're not alone. There are deeper meanings behind the surface. The energy around you can be harnessed to elevate your work. You are part of something much larger than can be explained, a world of immense possibilities. Harnessing this energy can be marvelously useful in your creative pursuits. The principle operates on faith, believing and behaving as if it's true. No proof is needed. So, just a slight little, again, we could carry on all of those, so many parts of that, hold on those threads. But I just thought that was just a little blurb, and it explained nicely that, again, we're talking about a whole way of being. We're not necessarily pigeonholing ourselves into a religion or a woo-woo practice. This is something that applies to our everyday thoughts, our everyday perceptions, and the way that we can control our own habits, behaviors, emotions, and all that stems from those things. So with that, I just want to take the next couple seconds here, and I just want to. There's two people on this call that aren't that are helping me. Or one is Allison. She's in the background, but she is my virtual assistant and does an amazing job. So if anybody needs virtual assistant work, that's a little plug for her. But she's back, she's here and might, chime in or direct questions or something like that. So I just wanted to kind of thank her for being here. And then we have Bekah. So Bekah Vandenberg, I never know how to introduce this woman, so I will let her largely do it herself. But she's been somebody that's been in my life for probably a bit over 3 or 4 years by now. She's come to the last two retreats of mine. Um, and in a lot of ways, I don't know how to do my work without her anymore. So, um, again, and I think in my email, and maybe where you got this link was, I in my coaching practice, and it has certainly evolved over the years with my own experiences and people I've reached out to for help along the way. I've worked with other energy healers, and all my own experimental work led to a study in spiritual psychology. And um, luckily, at the same time, or close to the same time, I met Bekah. And while I learned a ton, and that course I took, in the deep dive I took into spiritual psychology, was incredibly helpful in opening my world to a whole different way of being. And then I met Bekah, who helped me take that into practice and put it into my real life. And it's been, just life altering for me. So, with that, I will let Bekah. I think I wrote in one of my emails, because when I asked her at one time, "What do you call yourself?" and she said sometimes she calls herself a consciousness coach. So I'll let you take that, Bekah,
Thank
wherever
you.
that
Thank you.
may go. But it is hard for me to even talk about her without bringing tears to my eyes, because she just is so dear to my heart. So I am really glad to bring her to my community and all of you. And hopefully, this is just the beginning of opening up some real life conversations that we can apply daily. Yeah. So, Bekah.
Well, thank you, and what an
Mhm.
introduction. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
Wow. So Emilee was reading from the Creative Act. It's and she said, "Hey, do you know this book?" And I said, "I think I've given it away to maybe 50 different people over the last few years." Because it's such a notice. I think the byline was a way of being, right? It was a
Mhm.
way of
Mhm.
being. And we have been so indoctrinated into, what do you do? You know, okay, what did you do on the weekend? Right? Human doings, and placing our worth and our attention and our awareness on doing rather than the actual act of being. Who am I being? So before I launch in, because I can launch in pretty fast, as
I
it goes, right? I'll give you a little bit of who the hell is this woman, right? And what
Right.
is she speaking?
That's why I'm here. I always sort of laugh. And again, if you were at the retreat, I see some of my retreat folks on this call, but um, I am by far not enlightened, but I have been practicing for several years, and I think I've grown a lot. But I joke with Bekah in that sometimes I'm the bridge between human and spirit, I think. So sometimes when Bekah goes into her world, I have to bring it back down to the human level a little bit for
Just to
us. But
concretize it for us, like, let's
yes,
get pragmatic, right? Okay.
yes, yes. But yes, tell us a little bit more. Yeah,
Okay,
what your
okay.
background, what you do. Yeah.
hmm well, I was actually speaking with a client of mine this morning that I've known on and off for maybe 17 years, a while, right? And I was laughing because I was in the shower this morning, and you just have those flashes of memory. And I was a little girl, and even as a little girl, I was asking, what am I? What are humans? Why are we here? Right?
Mhm.
Pretty much existential angst at a very, very early age. None of the other little girls seem to be asking those questions, right? And so it was just something that, was an abject curiosity. There was a knowing, and I have probably said this to Emilee. I know I've said it to large groups of people, that I knew that I didn't know, right?
Mm,
But I also knew that other people didn't know they didn't know. I mean, they were switched off a lot more, right? Part of the I get now that part of the contract of coming back to this beautiful planet is amnesia. We forget that we've actually been here many times before, but I'm already going off on a tangent. So I had a very sick mum for many, many years, and she actually died when I was 18. And I remember her saying when I was 12, I'm only going to live until my youngest brother turns 12, and he was 6 years younger than me. So she died 2 weeks after he turned 12. And that had a very profound impact and like a resonance inside of me of like, oh my God, she chose
Mhm.
not some external force. Like, and she was very, very, very sick. They said, you shouldn't have children, and she had 4 kids, and you'll be dead in your 20s. And she lived until she was 47, right?
Wow.
But that started an activation in me, because I had no other purpose for being here, really, besides keeping her alive, because it was kind of a full-time job, right?
Hmm.
So there was no plan B when she died. There really wasn't a plan B, okay, now what am I going to do? Right? Because I didn't relate. I didn't relate to going, okay, you go and study this. And because I didn't really have a calling for anything. I mean, I loved writing, so I went off to study journalism and media and language and literature. And that allowed me to sort of play at least in language for a while. But
Hmm.
really, I was just more curious about that overarching, who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of being here? They're still killing each other, right? They're still not respecting their bodies. Because that was a thing when I was little. I remember looking at humans going, you're not meant to age like this, and you're not meant to get sick. I just knew that as a template inside of myself. That it's like if I was to speak to 8 billion people, if there's 8 billion people on the planet, like, hey, why are you here? It would be to share that, right? It would be to share that our very thinking. And so what I did, guys, I'm off on a tangent again, was I went back to basics. I studied sound, I studied breath, I studied movement mechanics, I studied nutrition. I didn't go into, after I left formal study, which really didn't work for me, I mean, at all. It was still sort of too small and pigeonholing, and I was like, no, 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 and I'd look at all of the sort of, various versions of psychology. And I thought, no, 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 no. Mm-mm.
Hmm.
I knew enough to know that I wasn't here to learn from somebody else. I was to find it for myself, right? Because what this game has been here on this planet is people teaching people, teaching people, teaching people, teaching people, right? So what I did was find for myself these very to break down all of who we think we are, right? So and I got it down to, well, the only thing I know to be true is that I have life. I have life force.
Hmm.
Everything else has been added. Gender's been added, sexuality's been added, right? Culture's been added, religion's been added, right? Everything's been added. So then I studied linguistics. I really got deeply into linguistics. I got into hypnosis very, very deeply as well. A whole bunch of other healing modalities along the way. I was a corporate coach for 15 years, sort of just working with the CEO or the executive team. Um, and then I moved to America when I was, goodness, what, 2002. I married an American. And I had enough of the corporate world and thought I want to create an international practice. And I've said this to Emilee, I'm sure, that I thought, you know what, I want to find all the other old souls on the planet because I appreciated there was a distinction between myself and many others, and I hadn't met many old souls. I met my first old soul when I was 28, 29, and we just looked at each other and just burst out laughing. It's just that moment when you look into someone else's eyes and go, oh, I know you. I remember you. And so I decided I was going to create a practice of old souls, and that's what I have done in the last, 22, 23 years, and so Emilee being part of the tribe, so it's a very different drum to beat to, right? And I tell you, guys, there are so anyone that's here on this planet now has chosen to incarnate into a very auspicious time in the history of humanity, which is a lot of people waking up, not just on automatic pilot, believing that, they are their parents. They're just going to become their parents. They're, their culture, their religion, right? You know what I mean? That they're stuck in all of these little boxes, right? Because most of the time people are running, if you scratch the surface of humanity, there's a whole bunch of fear there, because what we have been born into, what we've been conditioned into, is a lot of programming around fear. Fear of getting sick, fear of being lonely, fear of financial restriction, right? Fear of not being loved, fear. And that was something that I was super, super aware of from an early age. That, wow, what would it be like if people actually came from the opposite of fear, that they actually came from a deep knowing of the self? Because if there's a knowing
Mhm.
of the self, there's no fear. To really know thyself. I mean, it's been etched in all of the caves, from the beginning of time, right? Know
Mhm.
thyself, right?
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
But what we've been taught is that we put all of our attention out there, right? We get our validation out there, from parents, from teachers, from school, from, awards, whatever. All of it is being out there. It's never been shared, shall we say, that you can turn your attention in to go 180 degrees in. So when I was about 28, 29, I learned transcendental meditation back then, and I have meditated every day since. So I think I took 5 weeks off. I did take 5 weeks off, and my husband said to me at the time, he said, "Are you considering going back to meditating?"
Right, because it does. Yeah. I do notice the days that I don't, or if I feel too rushed or I don't have time, and then
Right?
I'm not as grounded and centered throughout the rest of the day. But with that, if you don't mind, can
Oh, go
there's
on.
a couple threads I thought to pull on in that might resonate with some of the people here today.
Mhm,
And one being something you just said about people, operating for a couple of threads, people operating from fear,
mhm,
people operating from a program, people, people teaching people. Um, what comes to mind, and I think would relate to some of the people on this call, is I had, a client yesterday who, trying to figure out her next steps and kind of relationship to herself, and did all the things, moved through all the motions, meaning, she grew up, she didn't want to be in the way. Um, so she was just the good girl, and she went to college and she got a job, and then she moved to New York, and then she got the husband, and then she has the kids, and now and, I, in a few conversations and a few questions I presented to her, and the hardest question, she's still struggling with a month later, was, what is your perfect day? And, that to some people, there's like, well, I have an idea of perfect day. Well, but I think that it kind of demonstrates how somebody doesn't know themselves, right? They've just been moving through or just checking boxes. And, I run into that a lot with clients, and, they're just following this nutrition trend, or following this exercise program, or checking the boxes, or doing this, and they're not slowing down um, to say, well, how do I feel when I eat that food? Or, do I actually like this event that I signed up for? Am I doing it because, it makes me feel like I'm, being respected, or makes me feel like I accomplished something, So a lot of the questions about what people don't know, and people just kind of operating through their day and moving quickly through their day, um, is where I see a lot of the benefits of this work, and kind of tapping into slowing down, learning yourself, learning what it is that you want, why you're doing what you're doing, and um, does
I
that
love I love that. It's like
feel
it's
accurate?
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the example of automatic pilot, right?
Hmm. Hmm. And it's quite common, right? And
Well,
we all,
it's inculcated, it's conditioned into us to be in automatic pilot by the by the age of 8 is when we have knocked out of children that more alpha brain hurts, which is connection and creativity and imagination, right? Okay, it's beautiful. But we've knocked it out by look at me when I'm talking to you, you know what I mean, right? And all of this, the school games and everything else. So it shuts down and people get stuck then in beta, right?
Right.
Okay,
In
and
old
beta brain
patterns.
oscillation is 14 to 21 cycles per second, and it's all about do, 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 and it's rushing here and making that happen there, and I'm juggling all of this, right? You know what I mean? And it's stress, stress, stress. And then people run on, as Emilee's heard me say, we run on these survival archetypes. We run on the victim, poor me, you know, my life is
Mhm.
so much worse than anybody else's, but I'm going to be
Well,
heroic,
they
okay.
right. The idea that life is this is happening to me
This life is happening
versus
to me. That's right. We're
to
not,
me
not an
instead of for
agent.
me.
We are no longer, we are
Hmm.
this innocent bystander in our own life, right? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's all just happening to me and around me. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which just creates overwhelm, absolute
Hmm.
massive overwhelm for people. And they feel less and less, and they feel more and more unable to shift and change because they're on this train.
Yeah.
They're on this train, and as Emily said, they checked all the boxes. I went to college, and I got married, and I got the kids, and I got the house, and we got the boat, and we got the timeshare over here, and I'm still not happy, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we've run by, if I could have this, then I'll get to do that,
Hmm.
then I'll be happy, right?
Yeah.
So if I could
And
have,
people don't, right. I don't think people realize like that they have a choice in that or how they perceive.
well, if we flip it,
Right.
if I
Hmm.
am being, as you've often heard me say, right? If I am being, what was it this morning? I think it was actually passionate and joyful, right? So I woke up this morning and thought, who are you going to be today, Bex? And I went, okay, I'm going to be passionate and joyful.
Okay, can I just put a pin in there because she
Yeah.
told me to do this I don't know, a couple of years ago, right? Wake up and choose.
Yeah.
And I had to actually just for those of you that like don't have a study in linguistics and journalism and writing, I had to print out a list. Because I had like 5 words that I was choosing from. So if anybody wants the list,
I'll
you
share
know,
mine. How's that?
sure yours. Because I was frozen by that. I was like, well, I'm gonna be happy, joyful, playful. Like, well, my vocabulary is expanded, but in the beginning when she told me, I was like frozen by these like 5 words that I could do. So I printed out a list and I actually keep it in my journal.
You are so
That's what I
digital.
mean. I'm
I love
somewhere
you.
between this. Okay, so back to Becca waking
Back
up
to
and
back to being Bex being passionate and what was the other? Right? Joyful, right? Yeah.
joyful. Okay.
So when we've got this window period, guys, when we first wake up in the morning, right, it was a very, very powerful, powerful moment. The egoic mind has already started. The one that just likes to nag. It's full of criticism, it's full of condemnation, it's full of separation, it's full of lack, it's nag, nag, nag. It's exactly the same as it said yesterday, right? Okay. That's not you. We have mistakenly hooked our identity to that noise when it's got absolutely nothing to do with us. It is a noisy radio station that's playing the same songs day in, day out with the same commercials. Yep.
Mhm,
Now you can
mhm.
tune into it and you're going to have a crap day, right? I mean, for years I tried to get up earlier than the ego. Didn't work. I mean, I was up at 3:30, 4. It's like, okay. And it was there, it was still there. I thought, okay, so I've got a choice. I can either tune into that or I can actually lie
I think
here.
I'm brain dead at that point, but
What's that?
I think I'm brain dead at 3:34.
I can lie here and ask myself, okay, Bex, whom are you choosing to be today? And allow whatever those 2 words were. And as I said this morning was passionate and joyful. They become a navigation for the day. Now, does that mean that I'm not going to fall off my perch and maybe, I get, a letter from the IRS or whatever, right?
And that
It
doesn't bring joy.
reminds me that
I don't understand.
it reminds me in that moment, it's like, oh, hang on, that's right. I was being passionate and joyful. So then that beingness begins then to infuse and imbue what actions and how I take those actions through the day. Because you can get to the end of the day, guys, and you might have done a lot, you've accomplished a lot. But if you've been an ass, you know what I mean? Who cares? You know, if you've been cranky with your kids or, dismissive of your partner or whatever, right? Or being aggressive in the traffic, that's all creating violence.
Mhm.
It's all creating violence. We all contribute to the violence that's here on this planet, all of us, because there's no such
Or the
thing.
or the love,
All the
right?
love, yeah. There's
Right.
no
And
such
that's
thing
sort
as
of that's
private thought
the
or
way I
feeling,
sort of
right?
understand too, is like we have that choice in the beginning of the day. Like, what energy
Are you
are you
sending
going to
out?
emanate and put out to the world? And is it going to be that, place of love, compassion, passion, joy, or is it going to be angry, victim,
Yeah,
hurt?
yeah,
Right. Like, what energy do you want to emanate?
yeah.
And people forget, I think, that they have that choice.
Well, they don't know that they have that choice,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yes,
they're
correct.
people,
That's why we're
they get
here.
up, they open up their phone.
Mhm.
And if they're opening their phone, then they're immediately the response. They're no longer the stimulus in their life, they are the response. Yeah.
Right.
It's why I'm big on those morning rituals. You know what I mean? That we have some sort
Mhm.
of morning ritual so that I am giving this vessel attention for the first 1 or 2 hours, depending on what time I wake up. And usually it's early because I like the dark and I like the stillness of it and I like the clarity
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
not other minds up, right?
Mhm.
So when we give ourselves that attention, because what have we been taught? We've been taught to get our attention from everything and everyone out there. And that just makes us like a piece of meat on a hook that anybody
Mhm.
can take a bite out of.
Mhm.
If we give ourselves attention, I know I'm good because I have given to myself. I've meditated, I've exercised, right? I've listened to some beautiful music. I've written something, whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. I'm,
Don't require anything from anyone else then. So if someone says,
yeah,
"Oh, Bex, I really like your earrings," whatever. Great, but I don't need anything.
right. And this is
And
this is
that's
a big
freedom,
step.
guys.
Yep. This
It's
is a big
freedom.
thing with my clients too.
Mhm.
And I see again some on this call that will know who I'm talking about. No, I'm talking to you. Is that waking up and doing something for yourself is sends such a message that you are the most important thing of that day, right? And you being the most important thing of that day is going to thread and make your day. People think, oh, well, I've got to respond to work and I've got to do this. Like, but if you're not whole and you're not the priority, you're not putting out your best self to
No, you're
anything that
not.
happens in that day.
Mm-mm.
So when I work with clients, like again, it's like whether it's, one of them has to wake up and take a cold shower because that's what she has time for, but it's like that's her, I'm important. This is for me. This wakes me up. This gets me sent, like this turns me on, right? Another one we're working up, like you must get up and exercise. Like, so what it is that you do for yourself in the morning, it varies, it depends. On your personality, on what you're trying to accomplish, on what it is we're working on, or what resonates. But the act of doing something for yourself first thing in the morning can totally change. And recognizing, relating that to I am important. I am the most, need to fill myself up there. You have something to add, I can tell. Go ahead.
Always, Em, always.
I know, this is great.
There's that beautiful line, not from me, from one of my mentors, of like how you start something is how you finish it.
Mhm.
So if you're starting from a place of clarity, you're starting from a place of peace, you're starting from a place of, oh, well, I've just had a 20-minute breath workout, whatever it is. Yeah. Then that is going to set the tone for the rest of the day rather than, oh my God, the alarm went off and I'm shoving on my pants and I'm out the door.
Mhm.
You know, that's just a
Mhm.
really punch drunk way to meet this magnificent day,
Mhm. And I
right?
think that's what you were speaking to probably when you admitted that when you didn't meditate for 5 weeks,
Mhm.
that your
More
energy, the way
react.
you act, the more you react, like because you
Hmm.
didn't sort of center and take that
Hmm.
time
Hmm.
and set the tone for the day, right?
Correct. correct. There was a lovely contrast frame.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's something so extraordinary. I mean, the gold of us is when we go in. And Em knows I have been making audio journeys specifically for, well, initially just for my clients, right? But they are being taken out into the world, which is my
Mhm.
desire. Yeah. So that people have something, they don't have to be a long-term meditator. They can put headphones on and they're getting bathed in alpha and theta frequencies. And the journeys are designed to empty out what does not belong to them, not add anything to them, to empty out so that we can listen. We can listen to ourselves, to ourselves. Yeah.
Mhm.
Have enough space to be able to listen, because most people freak out when they go in because the noise of the mind is so loud,
Right.
you know?
So, just to clarify for those listening, so Becca's audio journeys, they are obviously an audio recording. I don't know if that's obvious or not, but it's an audio recording that um, you can purchase rather inexpensively. And they have, as she alluded to, these beta, theta waves. So when you put headphones in, they are, and you can explain what the sound waves are
Sure.
doing. And then they also have these beautiful messages, and you've already heard her voice. It's very calming and makes you feel like Becca's like right with you there. And I listen to one almost every single day, depending on what it is that I need to hear or what I'm struggling with, or like, and sometimes I'll text and say, okay, this is what's going on. Which one, Becca? Which one do I need today? um, so that we will give you that link post call, or Allison, if you are um on it. It's Entranced Awakenings, and then go to audio journeys right on your website.
Actually, no, it's actually my Soundwise right? If you want to go straight to the audio
Oh,
journey,
straight
my
to it.
Soundwise,
Oh, okay.
yeah, the publisher's page, but
Okay.
I'll
We'll
send you
we'll
that
send
link.
that out then.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That was
Um,
actually not really a plug for me. The point of actually
no, no,
mentioning
no, no,
that.
not at all. But I was explaining to where they are,
Yeah,
how they work, or how I
yeah,
use them.
yeah.
And I thought, yeah, yeah, you know more about the theta waves. And so, yes, then go
Mm,
on. Yes, it
mm,
wasn't,
mm.
sorry, I didn't mean to turn it into commercial. That
No,
wasn't my
no, it was
intention
more.
either. I just
No.
wanted to share that I do use them, and they have
Yeah.
various messages. And it is, for a lot of clients, I find a way to introduce the practice of meditation, because you're right, some people sit down with a quiet meditation and they don't know what
Your
to do
mind is
with
off.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's
Yeah.
so much already triggering stress there and everything else. I mean, this is the beautiful thing. Like a dear friend of mine who I've known for many years, she's a sculptor. She said, Bex, what I
Mhm.
love about this is that you don't need to learn anything. There's nothing to prepare, right? So she's more in the category of ADHD, right? So she listens to the journeys, and because there's a story, there's always a story of some form,
Yeah.
right? You'll hear my voice, and sometimes you'll hear the voice overlapping and doing all sorts of things. Music,
Mhm.
and as Em alluded to, there are all of these different pulses of theta and alpha and delta and epsilon and all sorts of different brain hurts going on in the background.
And what does that do for the brain? What does that do?
What that does is it takes the brain creates new neural pathways. So rather than always being stuck in the waking state of stress, see what happens with long-term meditators is that they have that background always with them. So I've got all these different brain hurts running in the background of me so that I'm not just stuck in beta. That's the
Mm.
nature of why I say to my clients, listen every day, because your brain and your nervous system is getting bathed in all of these other beautiful frequencies, and you just find yourself feeling better, right? More rejuvenated, calmer. There's a buffer there, there's some space there, there's some peace there, there's some curiosity there, right? There's
Mhm.
openness there, there's availability, right? Human beings are so not available because they're so full of all of those stinking thinking, of all of the thoughts. We have the biggest addiction on our planet is to thinking.
Mhm.
Constant thinking.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
all thinking is memorization. You know
Right.
how to wake up in the morning. You know how to make your bed. You know how to make yourself a cup of coffee. You know how to drive the car, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Can you actually experience what is it for you to stop thinking for a few
Mhm.
seconds?
Mhm.
Stop it.
It reminds me of another client that was going through a big life transition and spent some of you will know spent 30 years working in a particular job and just wanted a different lifestyle. Anyway, after that process of so many years of just working kind of process, just checking boxes, doing the things, and um her homework was like, go to the beach and walk or sit and just do that. And it sounds like a lovely thing. Like most people would be like, of course, I would love to go to the beach and just walk and sit. It was so uncomfortable for her in the beginning, right? To just be quiet and just be with herself, right? It was difficult. She didn't, I mean, it took me weeks to months for her to like actually go do it, right? Which because that quietness and slowing down is scary for people and hard, and they
Well,
don't know what to do.
absolutely, Anne, because we've been conditioned to distraction, right?
Right,
Keep
right.
human beings distracted,
Mhm.
right? There are so many ways to be distracted now, right, from yourself, you know, and the phones and the devices being, the ultimate distraction, social media, you know, everything to
Mhm.
pull you out into the world again so that you're playing the game rather
Mhm.
than, hang on, what would happen if I actually just sat without a phone for 2 minutes, for 3 minutes, and I just stared out the window?
Mhm.
Everything's going to start to downregulate. As I've said
Mhm.
to Emma many times.
As long as they are set a timer or give themselves a time, some people sit there and then they just think about all the things they're supposed to be doing.
Well, I was about to say to focus, not think. So
Mhm.
right outside, it's very windy here in the desert, and I'm watching the oleander plant be violated by the wind, right? So I can focus on that because you cannot think and
I
focus.
was going to say, right.
You cannot. It's impossible. And as soon as you focus, and then you start to, because once you start to play the game of focusing, because it's all a game, guys, you start to play the game of focusing, then your focusing starts to clean up because then you get to choose, what am I going to focus on, right?
Mhm.
Focus on being all that I am meant to be here. Can I focus on everybody waking up on the planet and just realizing that they're here to love and be loved and share love? What am I focusing on, right? We could focus on a broken coffee cup. It doesn't matter. When you're first starting, just focus on something and then notice, hang on, I actually feel better. I'm calmer. There's more peace running here, right? There's openness here. There's clarity here, right? It's like, as I said, thinking just creates more problems for the most part. When we get a great idea, you get a great idea, and it's not because you've been harassing yourself and thinking. You usually probably
No,
on a run, you know what I mean?
always.
Walk, right? You know what I mean? Okay, what a great idea. No, 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 right? Yep,
Mhm.
it's gifted to us. We're all made up of the same primordial intelligence, but yet we run on arrogance. We run on this game because we're conditioned into this game, believing that we're separate from each other. We run listening, constantly listening to what we would call, the noisy radio station that some people might call the egoic mind, right? Just to give it a label. And then they think that they are their thoughts. They think that they are their feelings, right? And we're not. We're not. But unless you
That's
actually
the
start to
gift when
create
you
that
can
space,
understand that.
yeah. When you're left with, when you start to watch those thoughts and those feelings, and then what you always have there in the background, always, 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 is something that we could just loosely call awareness.
Mhm.
There's awareness there. So if you cast your mind back to yesterday, you will have had thoughts and feelings about yesterday and things that you did, and they've all passed by, but your awareness is here. It's still there. It's your awareness when you were 20. Awareness. It's always there. That is the continuous signal
Mm.
that we are awareness. We are made up of this wonderful thing called awareness. And so the more that we empty out of everything that we think we know, and we're just open. We're open, and we're choosing to go, okay, I've spent so much time doing, and we start to incorporate into our day just one thing. Who am I choosing to be today?
Mhm.
And I'll send you a whole list of words.
I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that has a problem with that, but
Right.
I needed help. I I've been, yeah,
I
it's
was
been.
telling, I might have told you this story, Emilee. I had this client over in South Africa years ago, and she was 86, right?
Mm,
And she was still mad with her first husband, who had already died, because he'd left his daughter some money, right?
mm,
Yeah, from his first marriage. And I said, so her name was Lydia. We'll never meet Lydia. She's dead now. Pretty sure. Um,
mm.
I said, so Lydia, I said, are you hurting for money? She said, oh, no, darling, no. I said, oh, okay. So why are you so angry? So angry? And she said, well, this is how I've been. I said, may I suggest that we just play a game? We'll play an exercise. And I gave her this exercise, of, okay, so Monday, you're going to be kind and loving. Tuesday, you're going to be sociable and da 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 da, whatever, right? So
Oh, you gave her a plan. Yeah, I
I
like
gave her a
that.
plan. I gave her a plan because she was so far down the rabbit hole of like just so angry, right? And just so in a
Yeah, she needed a list.
she needed a list. She needed a list.
Mhm.
So I meet with her. It was back in Skype days then, like it was a Skype video, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm on with her the next week and she's crying. And I said, so Lydia, you unhappy? She said, oh no, darling. I'm so happy. I said, okay. And I said, why is that? She said, because when I got to one particular day, it was like for her to be social, to be sociable and amenable, right? Because she was a curmudgeon, right? And she ended up knocking on her neighbor's door with some muffins, right?
Oh, big
Right?
step.
A
Yeah.
big step for Lydia, right?
Yeah. But these are the kind of things we do with clients, right? Like that, like, yeah, it's just these little moments of,
Changed her
yeah,
whole world.
I was
It
gonna
changed
say,
her whole
yeah.
world that she could actually choose how
Mhm,
she felt. I want you to really consider it for a moment because most people are not, to your point, Em, they are not choosing what they are choosing to feel, right?
mhm, mhm,
Okay, they're not. So that then somebody can just, all of a sudden they're just in a bad mood. You know what I mean? Okay. Their whole day's been ruined because they stubbed their toe. We know people like this, right? They're just,
mhm.
you know,
Not, yeah.
as I've often said to Emmy, moody people are people that are just not present. They're not here. They're not
Mhm,
here. They're in the
mhm,
illusory past or the future, right? You know what I mean? They're running some archetype of either victim or tantrum child, or they're sabotaging themselves, right?
mhm, mhm.
So
And
this
not
is
to say that we don't have bad moods here and there, but it's just being aware of
if,
that
if
again.
if I am feeling if I'm not up to par, then I am not going to be inflicting myself on anybody else, right?
Mhm,
Uh-uh. No,
mhm,
no.
mhm.
Not even the wolf.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's just,
So
again,
we
it's
very,
having
very
that.
quickly get, well, hang on, I'm in a mood. No, that just means, well,
Exactly.
let's just get present.
Right.
Let's
Right.
do, as Emilee will know from me, I'm very big on, breathing. Let's just do 3 huge deep breaths because immediately there's oxygen
Mhm,
flowing. Because most of the
mhm,
time people are walking around and they're not oxygenated. There's nothing going to the brain. The first thing that fatigues in our body is our brain.
mhm.
And it fatigues because of a lack of oxygen and a lack of water. Yeah.
And nourishment at some points.
And nourishment at some point, yeah. Yeah. But
Yeah.
water and oxygen first, they're in.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to throw the food in
Gotta
there
throw
just
it
in
in.
case.
Nourishment. She
I
knows me
kind of think
well.
it's important
Food,
every now
food,
and then.
sweetie.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's true. It's, I mean, I do think that's been an evolution of mine of recognizing, of course, things happen throughout your day that maybe weren't as planned, or maybe you didn't predict it, or maybe you would, in a perfect world, choose to not have happened. But it's recognizing, I spend a lot less time wallowing in things, or, sure, things happen, I'll get upset, and then I'm more quickly able to turn things around or get out of that or change the perspective, or so it's not like these things don't happen. It's just our building our skills, our awareness, our knowledge of knowing that we have a choice and practice of
Well,
it.
we've always got choice. Like this is as Emma's heard me say, and it's fairly common nomenclature these days that this is your movie,
Mhm.
right? Okay, this is your movie. You're the writer, the director, the actor, the producer of your movie. You're the only one that needs to shift, not anybody else, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And we don't want to hear that very often. You know what I mean? We still want somebody else. Well, if they just move this
Right.
way a
Blame.
little, or did this, it's like, no, 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 no. It's us. It's all of us.
Mhm.
Because nothing has occurred outside of our awareness. I mean, it's so sobering, guys, to actually appreciate that nothing has ever, ever, ever happened outside of your awareness. My voice is inside of your awareness, right? This video screen is inside of your awareness. Your,
This is where we get a little like,
I
I'm
know,
still struggling,
I
but I
know,
hear
I
you.
know. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then we start to rest in that and appreciate, oh, okay, this is all happening courtesy of this being. This is
Mhm.
Beck's movie. Where am I placing this wonderful, powerful gold, which is our attention? Is our
Mhm.
attention on the movie out there, or is our attention on, oh, that's right, I am the creator of this movie? So if I want to create something different, then turn your attention in.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. As opposed to, oh, well, I've got to make those things out there. No, it's too late. It's too late. You've already projected that out there. So go in and make a new movie, right?
Mhm.
If you don't like the character, most people fall out of out of like with their own character.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Mhm.
Right? Hang on, what happened to that golden heroine? Right? It was full of laughter and passion and joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And
Okay.
that's really what we're after. We're about like finding that in ourselves, right? Like
Absolutely.
finding and believing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, everything, and Emilee knows this. I mean, my practice is just about, releasing people from all of their conditioned persona, right? Because if I look at people, and without sounding too strange, but it will be strange, is that when I'm looking at people, I'm seeing their energy and I'm seeing what's not flowing, right?
Mm.
Our nervous system is meant to be this beautiful, crystal clear mountain stream. And for most people, it's not. It's a
Mhm.
stinky old pond. It's a murky old swamp. Nothing is flowing because they're so full of story. They're so full
Mhm.
of story about their childhood, their broken love affair, not getting that corner office.
Comparison.
Yeah, the comparison, all of the competition
Mhm.
games, the comparison games, all of the separate self games, right? And
Mhm.
this belief that we are this story, and I always say to my lovely clients, my wish for you is for you to be storyless, that you are a blank slate, that you will discover who you are today, right? Not because it's been
Mhm.
planned. Okay, it's all been planned, so I know everything's going to be okay. No, it's we're just going to discover. It's like when Emilee and I get on, it's like, she knows me well enough to know there's not going to be a hell of a lot of preparation or planning, right?
I got to plan a few minutes.
We did. We got a couple of minutes in there, right?
It's always like, well, Becca, what are we going to do today? Or how's this going to go? And she's like, we'll just see. The whole retreat, we'll just see. There's a little bit of
Because I won't
it. But
know. We don't know until we have other beings in front of us, right?
always, yeah,
Okay. And remember, we
yeah.
are made up of energy and matter, right? We've just been taught to be focused on the matter. not
Yeah.
on the energy, what we can't see, right?
Right.
Yep. The consciousness creates matter, what you are, who you believe yourself to be. And I don't even really like the word beliefs, guys. And I've said this to Emily, beliefs, it's BLIE, B lies with an F, right? It's beliefs are somebody else's story, right? Okay. At the end of the day, it's someone else's story. What do you know? What do you know? Turn your attention in. Get to know this. Get to love
Hmm.
this, right? To have some sort of daily awareness practice that you are turning your attention in,
Yeah.
right? Because that's where you're going to get your fuel. That's where you're going to get your joy. That's where you're going to get your clarity, right?
Hmm.
That's where you're going to connect to the vital life force that is you. So there's never a bad day. People go, oh, it's a bad day. The day is
It
innocent.
doesn't have to be,
The
right. It
day
can
is
be you can
always
have a
innocent.
bad
What are
moment,
you
or yeah,
bringing, right?
right,
What are you
right,
bringing that's making
right,
it a bad day, right?
right. And why does one little thing have to define the day when you could choose a
Right.
different little thing that could define the day entirely differently?
Yeah,
Right.
or define the moment, the beauty
Yeah.
of the moment. So it's like this moment, this moment,
Yeah.
this moment, this moment, this moment. We're born again every moment, every moment, every moment. If we're starting, what is this practice? I know there's libraries of books on being here now, right? You know what I mean? This
Yeah.
concept of being here now. It's one thing when it's a
Mhm.
concept. What is that to actually practice presence?
Right.
You know,
Right.
practice presence, practice not thinking.
Yeah.
So to break the continuity, okay,
Hmm.
of who you think you are, the identity,
Hmm.
all the identity games that we've played that have got nothing to do with who we are.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I'd say it's a lot of the work of, bringing people joy again is just having them fall in love with themselves first and trusting themselves and what they think. And so many people, I think, identify these things about themselves, but then let the outside influences change it. Or,
Well,
but
that's the thing. Yeah, we've all grown up with, somewhere between 5 and 7 is when we're going to form our first limiting belief.
mm,
Okay, you know,
mm,
yeah,
heartbreaking to hear as a parent,
isn't it? Yeah, 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 sure, right.
especially when your kids are 19. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. So
Yeah.
a lot of the time as I said, we're just cleaning out who we are not. There's beliefs that everybody has formed. I don't care who you are.
Right.
Limiting, limiting,
Yeah.
not enough in
Well,
some way, right? Yep.
yep. I am looking at the time and
Sure.
we as you can see, Becca and I can take these threads and we could talk for the entire day.
Easily. Yeah.
Again, work she does, work I do, work we do together, work in, like, so again, this was just a little sampling of, where these conversations to go and the topics that we always get on tangents of on how to bring these to people's lives. And really the intention today was to almost demystify this word spirituality and bring it into just a way of being.
Hmm.
Um,
A
so
way of
with a
being.
couple minutes left, I know it's not a lot, but it's also a little small group here too. I just wanted to kind of throw it out there and see if anybody has anything that is burning question inside or want to share an experience or um, anything. Most people have their cameras off, so maybe this is a little more intimidating conversation than protein. People are like ready to answer for that, but so no, again, no judgment, no like again, this is a new topic. This stuff does get a little bit more personal.
Hmm.
And again, really the intention today was just to give a little bit of a sampling of one, our conversations, and two, just the definition of this word that it doesn't have to,
I took
fall
a lot of
into a.
notes. Oh,
Sorry.
Melissa, you're so lovely.
Okay, Melissa. She's a very good student, Melissa.
I have your
um,
questions. I love it. Well, thank you, Colleen.
oh
Ah,
yes, yes, nice to see you,
lovely,
Colleen.
Colleen.
Um, yeah, so we hope that again, a lot of times things come up with clients or stories, and I alluded to a lot of them. I have a million examples of where this work comes into my practice, and obviously it's Becca's whole practice. And um, I do hope that it helped give you a different perspective on behaviors, thoughts, feelings, your day, how you have control of it. Yeah, with that, any other any questions, any or closing remarks from
Charlotte, this
Bekah?
was great. Hope you will do this again. Thank you. Yeah, well, my intent, and I don't know, share this with Emily, is but to
Oh, of
have
course.
have these ongoing, and
Mhm,
we will refine it by perhaps having a particular topic or a theme. I would love it if you feel free to contact Emily, or maybe we do a group email or whatever of
yeah.
things that you might like to talk about or that you would like more clarity around.
Mhm,
Um, yeah, because there's such an intense desire, a burning inside all of us to be the best version of us, and anyone here on this call is already familiar with that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be
mhm,
on this. Yeah, you
mhm,
wouldn't have met Emily.
mhm,
Certainly wouldn't have met me, right? You know, it's like this,
mhm.
it's all part of your lovely soul story, but that's another story. We won't go there today. Um,
Bekah,
Thank
Angela
you so
asked a
much.
question. She said if there are any audio recordings that you would recommend that she starts with for her 16-year-old daughter.
Her 16-year-old daughter? Wow, yeah, absolutely. Probably something like, and I'll send out a list via Emily, right?
Yeah,
I would start with probably something called Relax and Reinvent. It's just a really nice journey under a
I spend
waterfall.
a lot of time on that one.
Yeah, Relax and Reinvent's really nice. Yeah, it's a really simple one. Some of the body ones too, perhaps, Emily, like body love,
Yeah, I
things
was gonna
like
say some
that.
of like the ones in the golden oldies
Mm-hmm.
category. I
Golden,
find
comforting.
a comforting. They hit the topics of
Yeah.
basics, like I can just read off a couple that come to
They
mind.
do. Confidence. Confidence is a good one.
Confidence, yeah.
Trust.
There you go. See, why do I need to read them off when she knows them like the back of her hand, right? Here I am.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but we can
Yeah.
we'll
Perfect
certainly send a
help.
link to those. Like I
Absolutely.
said, they each come with a message, so some of this is a little bit personalized, right?
Mhm.
Because depending, you know, I've a 16-year-old girl too, which may be
And a
struggling with,
17-year-old son. Absolutely.
and
Endless. Yeah.
right, they may be
Yeah.
struggling with completely different things at the moment when these messages are really quite powerful. So depending, what's going on
And here's
with
the
them,
beautiful
but
thing, right? And I often say this to people, it really doesn't matter which one you listen to because it's all about emptying and opening so that you're left with you. You're not left with the noise of the mind when you wake up. You're left in this sort of calmness, in this space, in this stillness. So it's almost like you can listen to that beautiful, I would call spirit voice inside, that really resonant voice inside that's got you, that loves you, that knows you. And you connect to that. You connect to
Mhm,
that. So it's like,
mhm,
okay. It's like I've just gained a little bit more real estate on who it is to be me. I listen to them, not because I like to listen to the sound of my own voice. Mind you, I do. It's
it's
because
a
those
beautiful
messages
voice.
just come through me, right? So it's like I'm always curious and surprised because they're designed to get you out of the conscious mind, right? And drop you down into the powerful unconscious, right? Which is just connection to all that is. So it's the first divorce any human experiences between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And this is to
Mhm,
relink those two, right? I know you're
mhm.
watching the time, so
No, it's okay.
I'll stop.
I, I
So
just try to be timely as
yeah.
far as like respect for people that do decide to join, which I'm very
Mhm.
grateful they do live. It's always nice to have people listening to us. Yeah. But the point to Becca's point is sometimes, and this doesn't just go with her audio recordings, right? It goes with, either exercise or eating your next meal or going to bed on time or taking a deep breath in the middle of your day, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, it just start, right? And so to the point with like one of her recordings, it's like trust that your finger is just going to pick the right one.
Mm. Mm.
And just start, right? And it will
Absolutely.
lead, one thing
Yeah.
will lead to another, right? So it's not about finding, you know, like again, the perfect protein powder or the perfect recording or the perfect exercise class to go to. It's about starting and making it a habit. And again, choosing you
Yes,
from the
it's a,
beginning part of your
it's
day.
it's a lovely
So,
way to install. This is the reason why I made the recordings so that there's like, I don't know, there's more than 100 of them, I think now. So that
mhm,
people have a library so that they don't really need a middleman, right? They can actually just go and be with themselves and discover more and more about themselves. I've had clients listen to the same
right,
journey, the same audio for, you know, like a
right.
year at a time. I go, really? You're still listening to Be Your Own Hero? Look at that. Okay,
I love that one.
right. What you do
I
that.
can listen to it. I did listen to it very many times. I can recite it.
You know, because the
Um,
unconscious in us loves repetition, guys. It loves
yeah.
the
Well,
repetition.
you need different messages at different times because, again, it's a whole nother thread, and we'll wrap it up. But um, even though you get good or you think you've resolved a story from your past, they
Mhm.
do come back.
Mhm.
Maybe there's more distance between them, but
Mhm.
sometimes those old stories still creep back. And so that recording to me is like, it's
Yeah.
necessary. Then again, maybe I
Yeah.
haven't used it for years, but then an old story does kind of resurface, or so, you know,
It's
different
like,
things at different times.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like defragging and optimizing
Yeah.
the operating system, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
I
cleaning
love
things
that.
out that aren't meant to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you
I
so
always
much,
love
guys. I
talking
mean,
to
thank you
you.
for taking the
Yes.
time.
And I love,
And hello, darling.
thank you. Yes, Anne, nice to see you. Um, Thank you guys for taking the time to show up today. And those of you that listening to the recording, thank you for taking the time to do that. And again, we'll
Thank
be
you,
in
Em.
touch. If you have ideas, topics you want to hear about, send them along. And we do hope to have some more of these conversations. And the next one, we're going to go back to the body and gut health. But from there, we'll see where this goes. So lovely, always, Becca. Again, we could talk for days on
Thank
end.
you,
So
Em.
thank you for
Thank you,
showing up
everybody.
and being
Thanks.
here. And
Yeah.
we'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you. Have a good day.